So I just want to thank all three of you for being willing to come this morning and take an hour out of your day and share some of your expertise and some of the experience that you've had serving youth that are in care mostly, and youth that have crossover with resource parents and foster parents as well, and getting to just talk to us about that and equip our attendees. So I really appreciate you all taking time to do that. I'm going to introduce everyone, just a quick intro. I'm going to start with Hillary. Hillary Cobb is originally from Austin. She got her undergrad at Texas Tech and her master's from Texas Tech as well. So she is also the executive director of One Voice Home. One Voice is a haven for survivors of sex trafficking. Outside of One Voice, she spends her time with her friends, and she is just a wonderful advocate that we are so excited to have here and get to hear her expertise. Star Chandler is a friend of mine. She's a local programs manager at Forever Found. They're a local California agency providing case management, mentorship, emergency services, and wraparound support services to exploited and at-risk youth. And Hannah Arrowwood is the founder of Present Age Ministries. Present Age is a nonprofit organization committed to combating the sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking of teen girls. They equip communities to identify at-risk teen girls through prevention and awareness and education, and support survivors through holistic and individualized care. And Hannah has come up with a really incredible model to fill in a lot of the gaps that we'll be discussing today. And so we'll hear more about Present Age and everything that they're doing in a moment. And I'm so excited about this webinar and our fabulous panelists. In preparing for this webinar, I was able to really see in action how our webinar series has been a demonstration of our organization and the organizations we partner with at heart for collaboration. And the goal for this series has never been to say that we at Safe House know all of the answers. We certainly do not. The goal has been to find people who have the answers or who are standing in those gaps and to share them and their expertise with you all. So excited about that. That's really what our industry needs to continue to grow and to serve youth who've experienced exploitation better. So very exciting. I do want to start off by baselining us to understand a little bit of what the problem is. In working with youth that have experienced CSE, I know I have seen that many of them are youth in care, meaning that they may ultimately end up in a resource family home. And a question for our panelists, as people that are working with youth every day, what do you see as the current problem? Is the current traditional system of foster home placement working for these youth?
Everyone, it's so good to be with you all. I wanted to start by saying for any resource families that are attending, just a huge thanks. I know Hillary and Hannah, we all are on your side, and this is in no way, we're all learning constantly, right? And so I just know everyone's doing the best they can, but then we also can always be learning and growing. And so I think what I've seen a huge need for is when you're going through the licensing process and everything, every state's different, but that you're taking in so much information as a resource parent, and you're maybe not in that moment knowing exactly who you're going to be receiving into your home and their particular history or their challenges or specific traumas. And so I think there's a huge need, once that is known, that there would then be more specific training, not, oh, let me think back to that hour of HT that I maybe heard something about CSEC months ago or years ago or whenever, but really once there's that understanding that this teen in my home or this youth in my home has this specific history, that they're really be able to at that time be provided more specific training and a support and a place to ask those questions and be able to really look specifically for that population.
Hannah or Hillary, do you want to add to that?
I would I also just say thank you for all of those that are joining. We're excited to be able just to share what we've learned and the experience that we have, and also just to learn from each other. I think there's something beautiful about the collaboration and connecting with people who are working and doing the same thing. Just want to just build upon what Dar said, agree 100% with what she said. And in our experience working with minor victims that are transitioning into this walk of survivalhood, one of the things that we often see is their interaction with the foster care system. And whether it's temporary or long-term, we've got to create sustainable models that will support that, because what every child actually wants is to belong and be a part of a family. And so as we go throughout this webinar, we're going to talk about those details, but this is just another way to offer that solution to those who've been the most vulnerable, but also give them the best chance for success as they go forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I fully believe in the model of survivors being in foster families, because I think that one-on-one ratio, that's what they need. They need that one-on-one love, attention, unconditional love. That's what's going to help them continue to take steps forward. I completely agree with Dar that the 1 hour of human trafficking training is a big gap. And what we've seen locally in Lubbock too, there's a modality called TBRI, which is trust-based relational intervention. And you only get an hour of that in foster training as well. But what we go through as an organization is over 40 hours of that training. And it's an incredible training. And that's a resource that we want to offer. We as an organization have practitioners on our staff, and we want to be able to train foster families in that, because I think it will make a radical difference.
I agree. We love TBRI, incredible resource, especially when working with you. So we talked a little bit about this, but one of the maybe symptoms of the gaps that we're seeing is that the youth that we work with have a very frequent turnover in the homes when they are in foster homes and not in STRTPs. We see a consistent turnover. We don't see them staying in one resource home for long. What specific resources or training topics do you believe could be implemented to improve that for youth in care that have experienced CSE?
I'll start if that's okay. I think that the two of the biggest things that I think we've learned in providing training to foster families is one of the most important things is understanding the realities of complex trauma and how they present in a home setting. When you are only used to seeing a child 1 hour a week or within a school setting or things of that nature, it's a completely different presentation when they live in that home 24/7. And so equipping parents, which ties to the other training piece that I think is so critical, is realistic expectations. What is normal to expect within those first 30 days? What is normal to expect 60 to 90 days? What is normal to expect after? And there's lots of factors that go into that. Are they still in the same area that the trafficking occurred? Are there going to be frequent triggers? Are they in a trial where they're having to talk about it? And there's so many variables that affect that. But I think for parents that are resource parents to these children, one of the most important things is to have a true understanding of the complexity of the trauma that they're trying to navigate and heal through, as well as your own expectations. You're not there to be their savior, and you're not there to fix them. And so having just some baseline of expectations is really important for parents and community support.
I totally agree with that. I think another training that's super helpful is 6 stages of change. I think that this is a model that makes total sense when you're working with survivors, especially young survivors. And a lot of what we've seen as an organization is we want to create a space where when they do leave, because they will, they call us. And that's how you, even if they come back and they leave again, and they come back and they leave again, that's still a win. And when you understand that the 6 stages of change is very normal for them, that's just their body reacting to what's going on, I think that's also hugely beneficial, which helps you lower those expectations, because our expectations are so unrealistic. But when we remember the 6 stages of change and how they cycle through that over and over again, even in different pockets, like it might not even be leaving the situation, it might be relapsing, thinking, oh, what I did come from was normal. Like it can be in so many different lanes. And so understanding the 6 stages of change, I think, is really helpful as well.
I love that, Hillary. I think that is really helpful to have that visual and to be able to see, and like you said, to normalize it so that it's expected, right? It's not a surprise or taken off. It's not, will this happen? But when this happens, or when we see these behaviors, what's going to be our response? I also think it's huge then for the families that are navigating that, because it's not easy to have those behaviors in the home, to really be able to tap into their own support and have a wraparound. Remember, it's all about collaboration here, to be able to have those people that maybe knew the youth prior. I know we've had, as a case manager, go front with a youth from an STRTP home to 3 other resource families, and was able to provide and be that consistent kind of person that was able to continue to support that youth and be that familiar face, but then also to be able to support the resource families as well, and to be able to say, okay, maybe try this, or have you thought of this? Or maybe her asking for that $10 to go and get a smoothie was not being ungrateful. It might be her trying a different way, because she's not going back to her exploiter. And that's the most natural thing for her to do in this situation. And she actually is making a huge step to try something different. And so maybe it's not expressed in a lot of gratitude. Maybe it seems demanding. Maybe it seems entitled. Perhaps view it from this different lens or a different perspective. And I know the resource families, when you're in it, it is very difficult. We all know that and see that. And so I think recognizing that they don't have to be at all for that teen, and being able to say, you know what, maybe going on a walk with your CASA worker, or let me call our local Forever Found or the Equal nonprofit that can go and take you on a walk, or can provide that extra support one-on-one, and give the resource families some breathing room, and just the simple reminder that they're not alone in that process, I think, is huge.
Thank you, Dar. I think that's great. I love that example that you gave. I thought that was such a good example that so many of the youth that I think have worked with have experienced. And sometimes I feel like a lot of the times it is like, can I get these lashes? That's one that I hear over and over again. Can I get the nails? Right? And like how big that is to ask and be able to meet that need, and to show that you can get this need met without, which is a normal desire to have makeup and get your nails done and those things, and you can do that without going back to exploitation. And so I love that that was a conversation that we just had. Dar and Hillary, I know that both of you have tried to create solutions to the gaps that you've seen in your areas, but you've experienced some barriers. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about what you were hoping to do, and then what those barriers and challenges were that you encountered.
Sure, I can go first. Just a little bit about One Voice. We serve ages 18 to 25. We were originally designed to serve minors. And just in an effort, Texas is really crazy. There is so many you have to get a license, but there's so many red tape and hoops and hurdles that you have to do for minors. But if you want to open up a home for adults, there's no regulations. So it's like, hey, here's my home for adult survivors and you can come right on in. So we were like, wow, that's super sketchy. So we took what we had absorbed from the licensing process, which is really policies and procedures heavy, and we transitioned it to the 18 to 25 population. So that's who we've been serving for the last almost 2.5 years. And we love it. What we also saw too is that that transition. The only thing is that they turn 18. They're very similar in this 25 and younger age bracket. Our programming hardly changed other than just making it age appropriate and treating them like they're adults. And so we've loved being in this age bracket, but we love minors too. And we want to create a space to serve minors. So in Texas, there is a place outside of Austin that's called The Refuge, and they are designed to be a one-stop shop. They have everything you need on their property. But it is a multi-million-dollar model. And so for us, it was like, okay, can we do this in West Texas? There's lots of oil money, but Austin is a much more wealthier city than West Texas. And we were like, let's just start to unpack it. And so really what happened is we got slapped with some humility of, hey, I don't know if we're called to reinvent the wheel. I don't know if we are called to be the one-stop shop. And so we shifted our headspace and started saying, okay, there's so many people in Lubbock and the surrounding areas that are experts in their area. So we started asking lawyers and doctors and nurses and counselors and psychiatrists, hey, do you want to be a part of what we're doing? And literally, they all said yes. Every single one of them said yes. And it was either pro bono work, discounted work, or delayed billing, which meant it gives us time to get them on Medicaid. That's a question that I never even thought we could ask, but we did. And they said yes. And that was one of the hurdles because it takes a long time to get on Medicaid in the state of Texas. And so that delayed billing is huge. So through that model shift, we now have over $125,000 a year that is through budget relief, which is dentist work, all different kinds of things that people have said, I want to come forward and support survivors. So at One Voice, we say that we don't all have to do the same thing, but we all have to do something. And so it's really cool to see that people want to do that something. Those of us are on this call, we are a part of doing daily life with survivors, which can be high highs and low lows, and it can be tiresome and exhausting, but it can also be joyful, but it's surrounded by walking with survivors through pain. And a lot of people don't want to do that, just calling it like it is. But we were really surprised that almost everyone was like, oh no, I want to do this. I want to show up and I want to support in this space. And we were like, okay, great. Like that works. And that's important. So through that, we were like, okay, should this model shift into how we serve minors? And we were like, okay, child placing agencies already exist. They already hold the license. They already serve children. And so why don't we just talk to them and see what they need? So we started with the local Texas Girls and Boys Ranch, and we said, hey, where are the gaps in serving minor survivors? So they told us that a lot of times they fall through the cracks due to certain behaviors. And so we said, hey, here's this list of behaviors. Be watching for this. DFPS in the state of Texas is supposed to be doing this identification tool, but they're not. So that's a current huge hurdle that we are trying to overcome. But what we told the Texas Girls and Boys Ranch is, hey, if you see these behaviors, we can come in and do something called the commercially sexually exploited identification tool. Long name, basically in our world, we call it the See It tool. So what that See It tool does is it shows you where the child falls. It's got some questions similar to ACEs, but it's a lot more in depth. And the See It tool is really important because in the state of Texas, we identify a survivor if they fall in the clear concern category. So what we said is, hey, even though DFPS, we have a huge problem in the state of Texas. And so it's, hey, DFPS, they're not able to do it. So we'll go to the child placing agencies and we say, hey, we're trained in this. How can we do it? And so they've called us and they've asked us to do the See It tool. So through that, we did discover that there was a kiddo at the Texas Girls and Boys Ranch that was a survivor and clear concern. So we went in and we started to just pilot, what can this model look like? How can we partner with this? They already have case managers. So what does this even look like? And so we were like, hey, what if like she didn't want to go to school? So we have Texas Tech K through 12 program that's online. So she was going to start that. It only lasted 4 weeks and she was out, which is just very normal. And so I'm really excited to hear from Hannah, because Hannah is just miles ahead of where One Voice is. And I'm excited to hear what they're doing and what we get to learn from that. And so I would say the biggest hurdle right now in the state of Texas is that identification, falling through the cracks left and right. And so if there's anything that we can do as an organization, we want to be there and do that. But we also fully believe in the nucleus setting of a kiddo being in a foster family. We believe there's so much power in that and so much opportunity. And so we're excited to be able to create a model that is replicable. We fully believe in the refuge. The refuge holds a place in the state of Texas. It's specialized. They've got so many things that many youth need. However, there's also survivors that don't need that space and they would thrive in a foster care space. And so we're excited to be a part of a model that is replicable and can be done in all kinds of cities, big cities, small cities. And so I'm really excited to hear from Hannah and Dar and all of their experience as they've gone ahead of us in these lanes. So those are the hurdles we're up against and the little bit of experience that we have.
Thank you, Hillary. And Dar, before we jump to Hannah and hear about present age, can you talk a little bit about what Forever Found has tried to do and where they kind of met with barriers and some of those barriers that have recently come down?
Absolutely. Hillary, that's so awesome. I'm so inspired to hear like just what everyone's doing in their own state and their own space. It's really awesome to learn from you and Hannah through this process. So Forever Found, we have a unique role as a nonprofit in our county. And so we receive primarily referrals for minors ages, we say to 24, as you mentioned, Hillary, because that TAY youth is a special population and often the services are very applicable and crossover well. So I think one thing that we've noticed is I agree that we see so many of our youth not thriving in the STRTP group home setting, getting recruited, getting triggered, whether it be with substance abuse or their history of exploitation. And so truly agree as well that a home model with that more one-on-one attention is really what's valuable and needed for our youth that have experienced what they have. And so what we were meeting and getting frustrated with was seeing that we had families that were identified as specifically having CSEC training and wanting to receive that specific teen. Not just any teen, not just any baby to 18, but really, no, we specifically feel called and equipped for this population. And the hurdles and hoops and everything that we were meeting was really frustrating. And the youth was ending up not being able to be placed in those homes, but was getting either placed in a home where they were welcoming teens and had a bunch of other teens, but it was not the ideal setting. And so then they 14-day or runaway or those behaviors or substance use or whatever you see, almost, I think, as a cry for help to like, this isn't working. This is what I know to do. It's just to leave and then they'll put me in another spot and we'll start all over again with this. And so I think what we've seen really be encouraging is being able to, again, more collaboration with our local CFS and to be really able to have those conversations around, okay, we have these families identified. We know there's more. They just need to be equipped or recognize that this is a need. And, oh, I could do that. I maybe don't want to take a baby from the hospital, but this is my lane. And so being able to really work with CFS around, okay, what do we need to do to have these couples, these families in place to receive these youth when they're identified. And so it's really exciting. It's very new on our end. So we're very much right there at being able to start seeing those first youth placed with families who have gone through our specific mentor training, which is a big part of Forever Found services, is really equipping mentors through a 25-hour training to be able to come alongside of youth for that social emotional support. And so a lot of these mentors have been doing this for years. They've maybe started with a youth when they were 15 or 16, and then they aged out of the system, but they're like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. And so we have these youth that are 24, 25. Some of them have had babies. Some of them have moved out of the county, but still remain in touch with those mentors. And so those mentors have now that actual experience with these youth. And so we're seeing a lot of them wanting to step more into that role of being a resource parent. So it's exciting. We're right on the cusp of it unfold. It's really encouraging to hear from both you, Hillary and Hannah, as well, because you guys are ahead a bit. So
that is very exciting, and we're excited to see how that continues to develop. But Hannah, you've been very successful in implementing a therapeutic foster system and support network that was really built to address these gaps and create better outcomes for youth and resource families. Can you share about the model you created and how it has ultimately affected the youth that you work with?
Absolutely. I will tell you, I feel I am honored just to sit in this place and to be able to share what we've learned. And Hillary and Dar, both of you guys, I love just the heart. I think this is it. If you can get the heart right around collaboration, then you can do this and be successful. That's been my experience. And that's anytime I get to share that with people, it's when we start to look at this as a system versus as a silo, we're able to really put things in place to help these kiddos that just desperately need to know that they're worth fighting for. So I'll give you a little bit of background just to give you some context. When I started this work 14 years ago, the only model was a residential model. And we just were seeing such battles with that. And like you guys said, they'd go and they'd leave, and they'd go and they would leave. When they would go, they couldn't necessarily go back because they've left or the way that they left. And I remember just sitting there one day in my office going, there's got to be another way. There's got to be another way, which really led us to a lot of what Hillary and Dar have already spoken to was I in no means have any desire to recreate anything. It's so much work on a daily basis. How can we tap in and partner with what already exists and provide a level of specialty, if you will, to those already operating systems? So we actually reached out to a private foster and adoption agency, which I actually saw someone in the comments note that they were Allison from Lutheran Family Services in South Carolina. Hello to you. So we actually partner with Lutheran Family Services, which has existed for decades before present age was ever even conceptualized. And we already had a relationship with them and reached out and said, would you be interested in doing this with us? We need someone who specializes in foster care and licensing, and let us be the experts in child sexual exploitation. But if we do this together, I really think we can create a solution that would be sustainable. Also, who has millions of dollars all the time? It also became a way for us to tap into resources that are so important. So we spent about 18 to 24 months working together, leaderships of Lutheran and my team working together of, okay, what would you guys do? What do we do? How do we do this together? And because it was new to everybody. And so that's where we are today. We have implemented it. We've trained some families. I will tell you, I know that Alia asked Hillary and Dar, what are your obstacles and barriers? I will tell you, we still run into the barrier of identifying families who are willing to do this. Just because you have a good model doesn't mean you're bound by what resources you have, and our families are resources. And so that's something that we're constantly doing to recruit families. And here's what I will tell you is so important about that I think we all know this. If you're in this field, you know this, but creating a baseline of consistency and stability has the biggest impact for healing and recovery. Creating a baseline for consistency and stability, and having families does that. As Hillary was saying, to have a place where you can run, but you also, because we've equipped these families up front to say they're probably going to run. So when they do, before you're even vetted, you've got to be able to let them come back. Let's talk through what that looks like. Let's talk through what those potential risks are. So that's happening way up front before we ever place a child in a family's home, so that when they do, when they get triggered and when they have those moments, we call them happy feet here. When they get happy feet, they're prepared and they're not caught off guard. They're not shocked. And then as a team, and here's what also is so important. So our model of support, I'll give you an overview, but our model of support, if you're familiar with the foster care system, every state does it a little bit different. I'm in North Carolina on the East Coast, but we have level 1 is traditional foster care, level 2 is therapeutic, level 3 is what we call IAFT, Intensive Alternative Family Therapeutic Family Services. So that it's basically trying to input the model of a residential therapeutic residential placement into a foster care setting. So that's the concept, if you will. And so it comes with higher levels of everything, higher levels of support, higher levels of crisis intervention. The family is paired with, has their own case managers. The child has their case managers. Like it really is this robust system to support everybody. Because without supporting the family, you can't support the child well. And so it's really taking those things into consideration. One of the things that we use as a reference point, you heard Hillary mentioned it, I just want to reinforce it, is the See It tool. That's a tool that in the Charlotte metro area we have rolled out. So all of our community partners, we're saying the same language. So when someone calls present age and says, we think we have a suspected child who is a C-sec, what we go is, have you done the See It? Are they in that clear concern? And so that's also we all are starting to use the same language, which really helps the system support the child. We don't all have our silos and our own assessments, but we're really able to have that dialogue. And so we have what Dar was describing. We recruit families and they are our families. So with Lutheran, they don't try to pair them with other potential children. And so that was, I'll be honest, if anyone on the call is trying to consider implementing something like this, the way that we had to hash this out, because it's not the norm, especially when you attach a monetary value to a placement of a child. And so we have two avenues, if you will, that we have these discussions. We have families that we recruit who are like, this is what I'm called to. This is my heartbeat. They could care less really about the money. So they don't care to hang out until the right child comes. Whereas people who potentially didn't come into foster care with the idea of, oh, I want to foster a C-sec child, that sometimes you have to have different conversations with them. And so it's just knowing that you might have to have both. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. It can be or, but you have to be very clear up front where you're at and what you're working with. One of the things we consider that specialized, just in our present age world, those that have come in specialized, this is what they want. But also then those that potentially are not specialized, but are willing to become specialized, if you will. So we've had children placed in foster homes that are outside of this partnership with Lutheran through YFS, our youth and family services, and they realize that there is this training available to them. And so our Department of Health and Human Services will call us and say, can you help equip these parents? We have learned to adapt this model to help equip parents as best as we can in every situation that we can. But Hillary touched on it, and then I'm going to just say this and I'll wrap up and then pass it back to Alia. One of the things that's so important is, in addition to this resource family, is having the support for the child and the family. And that comes in a variety of different settings. That's who's going to help with tutoring, who's going to help transport to appointments, who's going to be the counselor for the child, as also the family, because the family also needs to be processing what's happening within their home. What are those outside social support services, such as mentoring, such as group therapy? Those are those things that present age in this scenario provides to this family and this child. So Lutheran really oversees the foster side of things with the state, with funding, with all of those things. And we can come in and be the expert when it comes to what does this child need? And let's initiate those conversations. We have weekly team calls with case managers from all of the people. It's an intensive thing to make sure everybody stays on the same page, because the last thing that we want to do is be butted up against each other. But in true teenage fashion, that happens in any family setting. So why would we think that wouldn't happen in this? And so it's just getting ahead of those things and knowing, as Hillary said, being realistic of stages of changes is so important, and making sure everybody involved understands that. And we're still advocating and fighting for the best interest of the child that we're serving. And it can be done. We've seen kids go to college. We see kids gone from failing school to on honor roll and enrolling in ROTC. because that baseline of consistency and stability was established, and now they can begin to heal. And my only other advice I would give to everybody is have long vision. If you think that you're going to see change in 30 or 60 days, even in a foster home setting, you are deceived. So have long vision in mind, but also have those realistic expectations that will support the child's journey in stages of changes. And then it's a beautiful process to see that come to fruition.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And when I send out the post-webinar email, everyone, I will include links to each of these organizations so you can see a little more about what they do on their web pages as well. So you'll get some more answers. And I do want to open up a little bit to question and answer, but before I do that, I want to check in with our panelists. Is there anything else that any of you would like to add on this topic? Hillary says no. Hannah says no. Dara, do you have anything else? Okay, I want to open up to our attendees. If anyone has any questions, we do have time for that. You can feel free to drop them in the question and answer portion, or you can drop them in the chat as well. So we'll give a minute for people to go ahead and ask their question. And thank you all for just being willing again, Hannah, Hillary, and Dar, to come and spend time with us this morning and give us a little bit of insight into what you all are doing and hoping to do. So one person asked, and this is a really interesting question that I know a few organizations have been looking at doing, how might this model, this therapeutic foster model, be replicated for adults? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Oh, you got it, Hannah? You want to go? I think that we as an organization are figuring that out. We had recently had a survivor that came and then she left and then she got back in contact with us. And so we're looking at what it can look like even digitally, but we've had volunteers that have, sorry, my dog is freaking out. I'm actually going to let him out as I move over here. So we've actually allowed us to figure it out digitally, but we've had volunteers that have moved to where she is. And so we've been able to connect those volunteers with what we're doing. And so I think volunteers are a key component to this as well, because we as collaboration, but also we have to be able to multiply ourselves. So we have to be able to raise up volunteers and different people in the community to walk alongside them as well. I wish that we had millions of dollars to hire all the people and go through all of the training, but that's just not reality. And so we are figuring out what that looks like from a distance. I think that this model too, we're also looking at more of a stair-step program with our residential setting. And so for us, it's more so, I think the idea of them coming and staying somewhere for a really long time just really freaks them out. Honestly, it would freak me out. It's a huge sacrifice to step into that. And so we always applaud them for their sacrifice, but we're also looking at how can we help them feel like they're making progress faster, even if we feel like they're still at a steady pace. And so we're looking at a model of, thanks to Safe House, we're so excited because we got a grant with them to be able to secure a second home where they can move through these phases faster. I didn't go into it earlier, but as of 2 weeks ago, we have a healing track, which is our journey healing track. And then we have an adventure autonomy track. So we have separated those two things. We've had them together. And what we're realizing is that there are some of them that are completely committed to healing, which we know is harder, but it takes more sacrifice. But then there's some of them, which I get it, I can be this way too, where they just want to move on. And they want to get a job and they want to do these things, but we still want to be able to help them do it in a healthy way. So we've separated those two things. And I think through separating those two things, we're also going to be able to see how we can do this outside of a residential setting. Sorry, I feel like that was a long-winded answer and I hope it answered the question.
No, that's really interesting. No, we're going to check in later because I want to hear about those two different tracks offline. Hannah, or Hillary, that's so interesting to me. And Hannah, did you have things to add about how this might be replicated?
I would say don't overcomplicate it. I think the reality of it is that you can just apply the same principles, even though you don't have the mandated governmental oversight because they're a minor. And so while you may not have a youth and family service that's watching to make sure that things are happening, like having some of that accountability among agencies. So whether you have an agency like any of ours that is the point person, if you will, is that the officiating referee of the team members, I don't know whatever you want to call it, but just apply the same principles. I think the biggest obstacle we're always going to find is who is going to be willing to open their home and invite this into their home. And I think part of what we have as a community, the biggest obstacle a lot of us have is removing the fear, because media we send this message out fear-based. And so it's really eliminating some of that stigma. And I think just applying this, I've seen it. I have friends who do this with adults, and it's literally applying the same model. And so get those people in place who are going to be accountable and create that stability and that consistency. It's just that also recognizing that 25-year-old has a little bit of a different say because they're 25 versus 15, and being prepared for that and adjusting yourself accordingly so that you don't get disappointed. That's the reality.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone know where a family or an individual could go to get the TBRI training?
I just saw that. I can drop a link.
Okay. Thank you, Hillary. And then the last question that we have is, if the See It tool isn't being used in their area, how do they get access to it? How do they get trained in it? How do they make it as a resource? Does anyone know how that's implemented?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually our point of contact for our task force that we utilize it. So you can just reach out to the West Coast Clinic and request. They actually have online training, but they also you can request a trainer to come out. What we did here in the Charlotte region is we actually did it. All of the agencies came together. We had over 100 people trained in one day from every agency. And so now we've become the trainers, and we can train our own staff as we have new team members come in. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it, just depending on whether you're an organization, whether you're a task force, whether you're a committee, whether you're an MDT, and then you are able to start utilizing the tool and the database that comes along with it. So I would just encourage, we can put that link here also for the West Coast Clinic, and just request initiate that training process.
Thank you, Hannah. And we love to see it. And we love West Coast Children's Clinic. With that, I just thank you all again for your willingness to come and join. Attendees, thank you for taking time out of your day. I know an hour in the middle of the day or the middle of the morning can be significant. I appreciate you taking the time to do that for us. And I'll be back with the next series very soon in your inboxes as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.